I don't think
No,
so.
that's it. There we go. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome so much to our specially scheduled public relations virtual guest lecture by Dr. E Cloete. He is an academic in disguise. That's what I like to say. He's also a very cool guy. And he's currently working at Massmart as a digital specialist. And he's going to share with us today about online collaboration and co-creation. So, Evo, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Karika. And thanks everyone for your time. Yeah, like Karika said, it's been a while that I've given well, not that this is really a lecture, but something to that extent. So I'm very excited to chat to you guys today. Okay, so what I'm going to take you through today is just, I thought what would be really nice and quite practical as well is apply the topic to my current day job. In different perspectives, because when I saw this topic, when Karika gave me this really nice topic, I thought like, okay, that's a very interesting one, because you can apply it in quite a lot of different ways when it comes to the world of marketing or digital marketing or broader communications. So I kind of applied myself and said, you know what, there's so much of this already happening in my day to day. So let me use it as a bit of an excuse to give you all just a view of that and how co-creation and collaboration comes into play in a marketing and comms environment within a corporate role. So just before we start, this is always a very embarrassing slide, but I just have it here in the beginning, and then I will move on quickly. This is just a little bit more about myself. Like Karika said, currently employed at Massmart. I specifically look after game, and I'm basically the digital marketing manager. Sounds like a very fancy title, but really all that I do is I lead the digital marketing elements for the brand. But yeah, I've been working in digital marketing and marketing communications for about 11 to 12 years now, give or take. And I've been very privileged to work on some amazing brands across the board, some global brands, some local brands. My favorite being PlayStation, because I'm a massive nerd, I'm a massive gamer. So that was really, really lovely. And then, yeah, like Karika mentioned earlier, I am also academic at heart. So I completed my PhD a few years ago in communication studies. And I did that specifically on the organizational structuring of digital marketing or social media. So basically, how do you build a digital marketing team within a business? And then, yeah, I've done a lot of lecturing as well. I have sadly in the last year or so put a bit of a halt on that to further advance my studies. But yeah, love lecturing and love this opportunity as well. And yeah, I'm currently busy with my master's in psychology. Okay, so then jumping in on it. So like I said, what I wanted to do is kind of take this topic and apply it in different contexts. And I'm going to try and start with the more boring stuff, if I can put it that way, and then kind of get into stuff that might be a little bit, hopefully, more exciting. I mustn't create an expectation now that I can't meet, I hope. But the first thing I thought that was very important in this world when we talk about collaboration, especially when it comes to a big corporate or a big retailer that has a big digital presence with lots of campaigns running. I mean, game is a good example. If anyone has been reading the newspapers, you'll know that the game brand is under pressure. So it is a mammoth task because there is a lot of expectation on the marketing team and the comms from the department to drive sales as aggressively as possible. So because of that, it's very important that we have a very, very detailed and very comprehensive support structure to deliver on that work. So what I'm going to take you through is basically just a view of how we collaborate within the department as well as outside of the department to really meet all of those expectations. And what's actually nice about this is that it was a nice actual application of my PhD work. Like I mentioned, that was all about the organizational structuring of digital marketing. So this was actually lovely because I could actually go and apply those findings here when I came into the business and started building out the team. But really, when it comes to any type of marketing, communications, or digital marketing team, there's different approaches that you can take to the actual team dynamics and building your team, the people that are doing all of the different facets of work. You can either have, a supportive, highly integrated marketing communication function where your digital marketing team is not like a separate team in itself, but it's part of a marketing team. And you might not even have people with digital marketing titles like a paid media specialist or a social media specialist. They might actually be doing a lot of broader work. So for example, a lot of you might have heard the term a brand manager. And a brand manager actually does a lot of work across channels, across traditional, across digital. So it all depends. But a lot of times, and probably most of the time, this is how it showcases and shows up in organizations, is that yes, digital marketing is very big and it needs to grow and expand, but we can't afford, to have a completely separate team. So it's part of the responsibilities of the existing team. The other approach that you can take is you can have it internally still, but like I said, then create a whole separate department. So almost like have a digital marketing department. And that's similar to what we have at MassMart. We've got the MassMart structure, and then we've got all of the what we call banners, which is just the brands, game builders, and macro. And then we've got our digital marketing teams within that. So that's similar actually to the structure that I currently function within. But then also, you've got a lot of companies that outsource their marketing or their digital marketing or their comms. And this is also very popular because it can be very, cost saving, because now you don't have to hire a whole team internally. You can have an agency that manages that for you. And I mean, this is the world that I'm actually from. This is my first corporate job. And really before this in my career, I've only worked on agency side. So that's kind of what I'm more used to. So coming into the corporate environment, it was important for me to figure out, how do I manage this now as the client, not the agency receiving briefs, but the client that is at the end of the day accountable and responsible for all this work. So that's kind of just to kind of give you an overview of how that works. This I'm not going to go through in detail, but this is just for interest's sake. When you build or structure your digital marketing team, there's basically different variables that you want to achieve, right? So based on the structuring that you apply, you might say, I want a team that is more agile. I want a team that has more expertise in digital marketing. I want a team that is more consistent and more independent. So based on actually how you want to structure your team and the kind of wish list of items that's most important for you, you can use that information to go and say, build your team. And what do I mean by that? Because actually, if you take those different kind of variables, those different elements, and this is based on the research that I did with my PhD, different aspects show up in different ways across the different approaches to organizational structure. So for example, and this is just to kind of make it clear what I mean by this, when you have an internal digital marketing team, visibility is going to be much higher. And that's very obvious to say, but it's important to note because the team is actually within the business. They're there, they're sitting next to you. So with that visibility also comes more control because you can very directly manage that team. Yes, an agency can be more cost effective, but the disadvantage of an agency is that lack of control because these resources aren't employed by you. They're working in a completely different building. So that for a lot of companies, to be honest, is very scary because for that relationship to work, you need to have a lot of trust with your agency partners. So that's just an example to show you kind of how these different variables show up in different ways across the different approaches to organizational structure. But really what it comes down to at the end of the day is that there is no perfect approach, right? Whether you do everything internally or you do it externally, there is no right or wrong. Really, the best way to do it, if you've got the option, is to take a hybrid approach, is to try and see, how do I potentially get some of support from agency and also get support internally and combine that to basically give me the best of both worlds, which isn't easy to do, but that's the, that's the holy grail. That's kind of where you want to move to. And if you can achieve that, it can be very, very powerful. So, and that's really what we have at Game. That's the structure that we use at Game, where we've got amazing agencies that support us, but then we've also got a very strong internal team that manages a lot of the work. And look, even with that, even though it's great, we've got all of this great agency expertise and What's also great about that is now you've got this objective third party that's also keeping you honest. And this happens a lot in a corporate environment. You know, you get so stuck in your own work. There's a term we use a lot of times, drinking your own Kool-Aid. So you might have heard that as well. So that's a big risk in a corporate environment, because you get so entrenched and obsessed with your own work. Sometimes you very easily miss the gaps in your thinking. And that's why it's amazing to have trusted agency partners that can actually give you their honest opinion. You know, that also goes back to how you set up the relationship. If it's not based on honesty, that's not going to work. You know, if you don't create the environment where your agency is actually open to giving you feedback, that's actually going to be a problem. So very important that you set it up as a trusted, safe environment. But if you can do that, it can be extremely effective. So like I said, we've got our agencies, and we've got lots of agencies. We've got an agency that just works on content marketing and long form blog content. Then we've got specialized paid media agencies. We've got an agency that does most of our digital campaign content. So basically specialized agencies looking at specific elements of scope in terms of what we need to achieve in terms of digital marketing. And then, like I mentioned, we've got our internal specialized team. And these teams are also very specialized, looking after, very easily put, specific channel sets in our broader digital marketing ecosystem, and making sure that we deliver on those different assets. Just on that point, if there's any questions, anything, please just interrupt me if there's anything that I need to clarify. The other thing that I'm also cognizant of is terminology. So if there's anything that I'm saying and you're like, what the hell does that mean? Please just let me know. Okay, and then in terms of the internal team, this is just to give you a view of what that internal team looks like. So we've got some digital paid media specialists that are all about making sure that we target the right audience and we get the right traffic, most importantly, to the website. Very important, because as the digital marketing team, that's one of our biggest responsibilities, is driving traffic to that channel. Direct marketing is also a very big thing for the business, and we've got a very sizable direct marketing opted-in base. And we've got a direct marketing specialist looking after that. We've got social media specialists, very important, making sure all of the content gets published, engaging with our community, you know, helping the customer service team responding to queries. As you can imagine, as a big retailer, you know, you're going to get lots of complaints, lots of queries. So it's very important that you can manage the brand reputation online. Digital operations, as you can see, you know, there's lots of parties here, lots of people involved, lots of work. So we need someone that is trafficking the work, making sure that everything is happening on time. So that's very important. And then myself kind of overseeing and looking after broader kind of digital brand strategy, if I can put it that way. And that's kind of just to give you a view, I guess, you know, if you've got this big engine of work to do, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and there's a lot of people required to make this happen. You know, in smaller companies, you might have one or two resources, or even one that manages, you know, the whole digital marketing funnel. The reality is, you know, in an environment like this, that's just not possible. that actually, the idea of that terrifies me, just purely because of the amount of work and the level of specialization that we need in order to remain competitive within the market. Okay, I'm just going to skip through just a little bit of a view of kind of the team experience. And I mean, this is also the great benefit of having a vast, diverse team, because they also bring all of their experience to the team. So now, you know, they've got their experience on the brand, but they've also got all of this experience previously from their career that they can use very effectively to apply their mind strategically on the work that they do. This is just a little bit of an example of some of the content that we develop. Some of our content from last year's Black Friday campaign. For those of you that know anything about retail, you'll know that Black Friday is a big event. So lots of content around that. We also do a lot of campaign work, thematic campaigns around specific promos and specific seasonal events, that type of thing. So lots of content constantly going out. And that's why we need this collaboration and this big team to make sure that all of it can happen. And then I think another important thing is also to note is all of the technology partnerships that we have. So yes, we've got our agencies that are looking after specific scope, and we've got our internal teams, but there's also a lot of technology and systems that allow us to actually, you know, apply our digital marketing strategy and make sure that it's on the level where it needs to be. And there's lots of different tools. Everything from market intelligence tools and social listening tools to tracking and engagement, affiliate marketing, marketing automation, many tools here that we can use. And then we've also got very direct partnerships with the like of Facebook and Google. Very important because, we're obviously as a big retailer, we've got dedicated accounts with Google and Facebook, and we've got support account managers that help us optimize our spend on a constant basis. But that partnership is also vital, because we look at those partners to once again keep us honest, but also help us identify new opportunities for the brand in terms of what can we do better, how can we drive even more sales, and just improve our approach in general. So that's also very important in the context of us talking about collaboration. And another big partner that we collaborate with is the Massmart e-commerce team. And this is where it kind of becomes a little bit more complicated, because a lot of people, if I say to them, okay, I'm the head of digital marketing, they'll ask, but does that not include the website? Yes, it does, but technically also it doesn't. It's actually a completely separate e-commerce team that is solely dedicated to running this website. And I mean, once again, you can imagine as a big retailer brand with the e-commerce presence and a new website, by the way, that just launched very recently. So I don't know if any of you have ever shopped for Game Online, but if you haven't, now is the time, because we've got a nice flashy new website. But anyways, there's a whole team, a separate team that manages the website. And you can imagine, a brand like Game has lots of categories, right? Lots of types of products that we sell. So the store is also big because there's so many products, there's so many things that the brand actually sells online. It is a store in itself. So we need a group of people that manages that store, make sure that the product descriptions are correct, loading the product lines, updating it with new campaign information. All of those things take a lot of time and a lot of coordination. So that's another separate thing. And we really work very closely with the e-commerce team, because at the end of the day, my main responsibility is getting customers to the website so that they can convert and buy products. And that's where, the paid media specialists become very important. But at the end of the day, if we don't know how the website is performing and we don't work together with the website team very closely, the website will not be effective, will not be able to drive sales for the brand. So that collaboration on that front is super important. So work very closely with this team, because at the end of the day, our success is dependent on each other in terms of the broader world of Massmart that we have to look after. So yeah, that's kind of the first part. I'm wondering, maybe I can take a quick pause here just to ask if there's any comments, any questions. But if there's nothing, I'll jump into the next section, but I'll just give us a second or two to check. Oh, good. Okay.
All good, guys. If you have questions, just remember you can make use of the chat function to write it.
Oh, yes, yeah. And I am looking at the chat as well, so that's fine. And I'm just checking everyone can see my screen while I'm taking this. It would be very awkward if I only realize this now. All good.
All good.
All good. Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, so then let's go into the next section. So like I said, that was all about collaborating as a team to deliver on the work, right? So that's quite operational. It's more about who's doing the work and how we're working together across this, complicated business of lots of stakeholders to deliver digital marketing. But and that's very internal, right? Except now for the agency part, it's mostly about how we as a team, or how we define ourselves as a team, work together. But then at the end of the day, a retailer outlet like Game is at the end of the day nothing without its brands, right? The brands of the products that we sell in store, like Samsung or Hisense. So very important that, it's not just about collaborating internally, it's also about collaborating externally. Very important, because, at the end of the day, without great products in the store, there is no shop, right? There is nothing to sell. So our partnership and our collaboration with these other brands is vital. And that's kind of the second part of what I want to discuss, is how we work together and collaborate with different brands in the digital marketing space. So firstly, just to kind of give you kind of a view, what I mean by collaboration is that as Game, we obviously run campaigns, right? And we would run campaigns either on a category. Let's say, for example, we are running a campaign around load shedding because there's lots of load shedding now. So it's a tactical opportunity. Let's sell some generators, anything like that, as an example, inverters, that type of thing. So that's a tactical opportunity. But for most of the part, our campaigns are centered around specific products and brands that want to drive increased sales for their product. So a good example would be Hisense. So we've got a great relationship with the Hisense brand, and we collaborate with them to deliver on digital marketing campaigns that drive sales for Hisense products on games platforms, right? Obviously, being e-commerce being one, and in game stores being the other one. So very important that we've got a proper structure in terms of firstly how we engage with these brands and how we actually get campaigns going. How do we develop campaigns and work together for those campaigns to actually happen? And this is kind of just to give you a very high level view of what that process is. Most of the time where we would start is do some research. So if a brand comes to us and say, listen, we want to run a campaign with you. We already, Game already stocks some of our products, but we want to increase sales. Can you help us? We say, that's great. Let's start by doing a bit of research and understanding how well your products are firstly selling, who's your audience, who's buying your products, so that we get a bit of a strategy going in terms of how we would approach this. Then based on that, we work together with the supplier to develop the brief, the actual marketing brief, in terms of, okay, this is a bit of the insights that we've got, but let's get into the detail of understanding what's your budget, who do you want to target, how long must the campaign be, is there a competition element included, whatever that might be. Once we've agreed to the brief, we start working on the creative, and what we call creative, that's just our messaging, the visuals and the copy. We get that designed and completed. Campaign goes live. We monitor the performance, and at the end, we report and provide that report to the supplier. So that's just kind of to give you a view, like when it comes to supplier campaigns, that is our accountability as the retailer to deliver on those campaigns for the brand. And look, at the end of the day, it's a win-win for everyone. It's a mutually beneficial relationship because yes, the supplier wants to drive more products for their brand, but as Game, at the end of the day, we want to support our bottom line and drive more revenue. So it's a win-win for all parties involved to make sure that that process is as seamless as possible and that we're driving as many sales as we can in that role. I see we've got a question here. Let me just quickly take a pause. Oh, Shane, this is very nice. Someone just said it's a very nice presentation. All right, thank you so much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, so that's just the kind of the process there, just to give you a view. I thought what would also be good is just to also give you an overview of when we talk about Game Digital, what are all the channels involved, and why is that important when we talk about suppliers? And this is actually something interesting because I don't know how many people always think about this, but when it comes to supplier budgets, right? So a supplier is now coming to me and say, Evo, I've got 100,000 Rand to run a campaign. That's fantastic, right? Because now we're getting additional budget from the supplier to promote their products on Game, which is fantastic because we can use that budget then to very effectively market the campaign. But the reality is that the retail market is highly competitive, right? As you all know. And even if you think about Game's products are across a broad range of categories, right? From essentials to electronics to small appliances, large appliances, clothing. It's very, very broad. And the problem with that is that makes the competitor set is also very broad, right? Because across that broad range of categories, you have multiple competitors. And the reality is those competitors are also fighting for supplier budgets, right? So the same way Game wants budget from Hisense to run a campaign, Incredible Connection wants exactly the same thing. And these brands also, they have finite budgets. They don't have the liberty of just, running campaigns with every retailer. So they also want to be very strategic around where they spend that budget. So it's very important for me to make a very strong, pitch to those suppliers on why you should advertise at Game. Like what is the benefit for you? What can we do for you that other retailers can't? Because at the end of the day, we are competing with our competitors for that supplier budget. Unless, of course, it's a brand that only restock. But to be honest, that's quite rare because most of the time, most brands are being resold at multiple retailers. So I thought just might be interesting just to kind of understand, I guess, that tension. And that's why it's very important that we, quite aggressively try to fight for that budget. And this is also part of, the pitch, is to say to, those suppliers, we've got a very vast digital marketing ecosystem. And I mean, I'm also very privileged that my predecessors put a lot of work in building this ecosystem. We've got a massive Facebook account, a greatly engaged Instagram account. We're very active on Twitter. Game even as a highly engaged WhatsApp bot, a YouTube channel. I mentioned the direct marketing work that we do on SMS and email. And then we've got this great new flashy website. So, all of those elements together becomes quite an appealing offering to a supplier to say, okay, in the past, I wouldn't really consider game, but looking at this now, I think it would be great to partner with the brand and do a few campaigns to drive sales. So this is kind of just part of the thinking. And part and parcel of that is also to say, this is our ecosystem, but this is all of the additional value that we can give you. We can create a package for you where you get additional value, right? So yes, you've got your campaign budget, but if you give us a little bit more money, we will give you added value for you. It sounds a little bit like a very marked ad, but it's probably not too far off. But that type of thing is important, because if one retailer can give me additional value that I can't get from another retailer, that could be the thing that swings me and makes me decide to spend my money at that retailer. So all of those type of things are very important. Like I said, established online presence, sizable social media audience, sizable direct marketing base, and all of these things really add up, because this is what brands want. They want reach. They want to have access to an audience, and that is what game can provide those brands, via this expansive digital marketing ecosystem that's been created. And then we also have lots of different types of programs, especially in the online space. We can do quite a lot of, creative and more kind of diverse types of options for a supplier that wants to advertise with us. We can do omni-channel campaigns that are both in store and online. We can do an online-only campaign, which is always great, and we push this a lot in the business, because we want to make sure that, especially now with the new website, there's a unique reason for shopping with Game Online, right? If all the deals are just exactly the same as what you can get in store, what is the benefit to the customer? So that type of work is also very important for us. We also invest a lot of time in content marketing. And look, in the retail space, this is quite tricky, because I think in traditionally, when it comes to retail, it's all about product first. It's about price. It's about discounts. That's the world of retail. But that is slowly shifting, and a lot of retailer brands are realizing that it is about the long-term game. It's about building brand affinity, building a relationship with your customer. And yes, we need to promote the product, but we also want to develop a relationship with the customer. And one of the best ways to do that in the digital space is, content that isn't just product and price, that is actually enriching the customer's experience of the product. So an example would here be like one of the articles here on the right. You'll see the banner, easy fixes for common TV problems. Very, very simple thing, but great content, because yes, we're not now just telling you about how great our TVs are, but we're actually helping you get more value from your TV after you've bought it, right? And that type of thing, even though, it is quite indirect, it can make a big difference over time in a customer's brain to say, you know what, this brand is going above and beyond. Yes, their products are great, but they're actually giving me added value, and they're really enhancing my experience of the product. So that's why the content marketing elements are also very important for us. We also do quite a lot of research. We've got a mass market consumer panel, very powerful tool where we can do customer research for brands, get insights into their products, get insights into their audience. So that's also great. I mentioned the fact that we do reporting. And this is also, this is quite a basic thing, because when you run a campaign, you have to be reporting on it. But I think it's more about how we report, and the detail of the insights that we can provide to suppliers. But this is also super, super important. And yeah, with the reporting as well, we develop a measurement framework for the brand. What that really is these are the KPIs. So if a brand comes to us and say, okay, I've got 50,000 Rand to spend, it's very important that we can give them an idea of what they can achieve or hope to achieve with that investment, and it comes back to what I said earlier. Brands can't just afford to, just push money out. They need to know what is the return on the investment that they get. So it's very important that we give them a view, we manage expectations, and that also helps just kind of seal the deal. I see Nathan, you've got your hand up.
I hope this is not a left field question, but I was just looking through the Play Store. There's no application for Game. Is there a reason why Game hasn't entered into that place?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Nathan. There was actually a few years back before I started, there was a Game app. But to be very honest, just it didn't take off. Multiple reasons. I think, one of the complexities with Game is that it is a very broad audience, right? Some of the retailer brands that have highly successful apps has a very digitally mature audience. In the game world, even though a segment of our audience is that, there's a massive segment of the game audience that, doing shopping via app might not be kind of the first port of call for them. But in saying that, you're 100% right. Like, having an app is very important. When it comes to that kind of journey for Game, the focus now has been on the website and developing that new website. And the next step would be to start seeing how we roll that website code out into other mobile platforms. And that's purely just based on a priority, a prioritization of the channels where we are currently getting the most revenue. So let's prioritize and get them up to speed. Because to be very honest, the previous version of the website, had lots of problems. So now with that kind of underway and the website, doing really great, the next kind of part is to look at more mobile options, apps, microsites even. There's some interesting projects around, how do we start potentially engaging with the customer in store in a more digital way. I can't go into too much detail there, but 100%. So you're 100% right. It's basically just a case of business priorities. But I think in terms of future growth, that's definitely a big area for the business.
Thanks for that.
Okay, cool, no problem. No, it's a very good question. This we kind of already spoke about. And this I'm not going to go through in detail, but just like a few examples, of campaigns that we run for suppliers and for brands. This was our Black Friday campaign that we ran last year, our digital campaign, very simple campaign where we used a microsite device to ask people what type of Black Friday deals they were interested in pre-Black Friday, just to build some excitement. Did extremely well because it kind of helped us create a runway before Black Friday and also identify a relevant audience. So about the time Black Friday actually hit, we already had a very engaged audience that we can target and that were already highly, anticipating Game's Black Friday deals. So that was very successful. And these are the type of campaigns, especially for big, seasonal events that we try and launch for the brand. And this is also just a small little example of an online-only digital case study for a campaign that we ran last year. But not going to go through this in detail, but this is kind of just to show you some of the work kind of in action. Okay, so that's, we've spoken about collaboration internally, we've spoken about collaboration with suppliers. Then if we go more into the co-creating elements, because those two speak more about collaboration, when it comes to co-creating for me, and I mean, especially, this is a course around PR, you guys will all know about the importance of influencers. And in the digital space, when it comes to digital PR, influencer marketing and influencer communications is probably one of the most powerful vehicles that you can have to your disposal because it is a great way to drive earned reach for the brand. So not going to spend too much time on influencers because I also, thinking that there's probably a lot of work that you guys have already done on influencers and exposure on this. But just a few simple things in terms of kind of how we think about influencer work. So really, firstly, just kind of from a theoretical perspective, why influencers are important is that when you look at messaging, right, and the level to which any type of message is persuasive, there's different aspects that build that persuasive quality. A message has to be credible, it has to have some sense of emotion, but it also has to have logic, right? And how those basically three elements come together is what determines how effective your message is. And if you take that triangle and you put digital brand messaging into that triangle, it's sitting at the bottom of the triangle. So what do we mean by that is, when it comes to brand messaging, you can make it very emotional, right? You can definitely either make it very humorous or maybe even sad, but you can definitely imbue emotion into that messaging. And you can also make it very logical. That's very easy to do with messaging. But what brand messaging a lot of times miss is credibility or trustworthiness. And why? Because at the end of the day, customers know brands are here to sell their stuff, right? There's an agenda, right? And so if you're on a brand's Facebook page and you see a post, you might think it's interesting, or you might engage with it. But at the end of the day, you're always going to be skeptical of it because you know it's coming from a brand that's trying to sell you something. And that really is kind of where influencers come in play, because influence is kind of this perfect combination of all of those elements, because influencers can create messaging that is emotional, that is logical, but also highly credible, because usually they have more credibility than brands. I mean, I say that with a massive caveat, because you also get influencers, that it's all about how they do the influencer content. You can get influencers that come across as very much pushing a specific agenda, and that might not help at all. But then you can get influencers that are really great at their craft, very authentic, very genuine, and that's exactly what you're looking for as a brand. Those type of partnerships that are really, authentic vehicles for your brand messaging, so that you can get that credibility into your brand messaging. And that's really, in a nutshell, why influencers are really important. There's lots that you can do with influencers. You can use them to amplify existing owned content of the brand. They're great at increasing awareness because they've obviously got their audience. So now you're suddenly getting access to their audience. They're a great way to drive brand loyalty, especially for a brand, in a retail space where there isn't always a lot of brand loyalty, especially if we talk about, game, which is all about low prices. Most of that audience, it's not about loyalty. It's about where I can get the best price for something. Influencers can really help you drive that brand loyalty. They also create their own content, and they can even help you drive sales. Maybe a lot of times it's indirect, but at the end of the day, it can definitely have a great long-term impact in terms of sales. Brand benefits, like I said, gives you access to untapped audiences. Influencers are experts in their own content creation, and also they can be quite adaptable. Influencers are quite flexible. They can, because they're not big companies, you can get a campaign out of an influencer much more quickly, usually, than you can potentially sometimes with your own team. So there's also that speed element that I think is also important. Just kind of some key principles around influencers. Very important that you choose your influencers well, and you choose influencers that are directly relevant to the brand's audience. They don't have to be your audience, but is it an audience that is related to your brand? That's very important, because if it's an audience that's not going to buy your products, why use that influencer? It's also important that they align to your brand's personality and identity. It's not that they have to mimic it, but they have to be complementary. The game brand is quite humoristic, tongue-in-cheek, not Nando's level, but doesn't take itself too seriously. So our influencers also have to, support that brand identity. If we now suddenly have all of these very serious influencers, it's not going to feel like a good fit for the brand. I mentioned this as well, but you have to be very wary of overused influencers, and there's a lot of them out there. So be careful of that, because yes, they could be great and they've got great reach, but they could be at a point where they've lost their credibility because they basically just sold themselves to every brand that's willing to pay. So that's also just something to be wary of. It's important that you allow the influencer to be authentic. And this is a thing that a lot of brands get wrong, is that, they want to control the message. They want the influencer to say something very specific in a very specific way. And that's very dangerous. If you force it too much, that influencer completely loses their authenticity, and it actually just doesn't help the brand at all. So that balance is always very important. And yeah, also just be cognizant not to overuse the same influencer. So this is similar to one of the previous points, but this is more to say, as a brand, don't rely too much on just one influencer. Diversify kind of your portfolio of influencers. And I mean, in the game world, that's especially relevant because we sit across all these different categories. So we have lots of different target audiences that all, might be dissimilar. So we need lots of influencers to speak to those different audiences per the different category of product that we're selling. I'm just looking, Karika, you must keep me honest. How much time do we have left? Because I see we pause.
Yeah, so if we can wrap it up perhaps in the next 5 minutes, because we already have 2 questions here.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's
yeah.
perfect. I'm glad I'm asking. No, that's perfect. So that's cool. We're almost done with this section. So I'm just going to finish this section. I think another important thing just to note here is that, when you set up a partnership with an influencer, it's very important to think about also what the influencer needs. Obviously they want some sort of exchange from you, but they want a partnership most likely that is long-term. The influencer business is very cutthroat. It's difficult because you're basically a freelancer trying to get all of these deals with brands. So if you can give an influencer a long-term agreement, that is something that becomes very attractive to an influencer. So that's the type of stuff that you want to look at. Influencers also want to create great content. Influencers don't want to create content that they're not proud of. So working together with an influencer to create that great content is very important. They want flexibility, and they want also that their voice is heard in the process, because also influencers are creative people. So, make sure that you're collaborating with them. I mentioned the whole long-term versus short-term thing. And it's very important that you also understand their world. I think a lot of brands also struggle with them is that it's all about the brand and the brand's world. But I think it's important to also show empathy and understanding for the influencers world. And I think if you set up a partnership like that, you can co-create amazing content with your influencer partners. And I mean, this is just to give you a view. I think, in the influencer space, when a lot of people think about influencer work, they are very focused on the monetary exchange. I've got this influencer, they want 20,000 Rand to send out this tweet, and that's it. But it's actually, if you drill down into it, there's a lot of additional value that you can offer an influencer. Influencer partnership doesn't always have to be financial or monetary. You can, for example, create like a brand association, a brand sponsorship of the influencer. You can do a trade exchange. As a retailer brand, that's something that we can offer an influencer. Maybe give them access to a new phone model that's just launched, and then ask them to review the phone model, but they can keep the phone. Those type of things can work very effectively. So this is just a note to say that, when it comes to managing influencers and creating that relationship, it doesn't just always have to be a monetary exchange. And I think, though, let me stop there. So there was one final section, just to intro that. This would just have been a little bit example of a campaign that we ran recently in December around the festive period, which was all just about co-creating with customers. But yeah, that's basically it. Let's look at the questions here. I see there's some long ones here. Okay, great.
Yeah, and then I think let's just answer the questions. And if you have time, I think the co-creating with customers, because technically they have time till 5:10. If we have time, then you can jump back into the co-creating with customers.
Good. No problem at all. Okay, great. Out of context, are you happy with your career? Is this what you absolutely love doing? And how does your love for it enhance your imagination in regards to job? Okay, great. Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I mean, I'm going to be very honest. I kind of fell into digital marketing completely by chance. I think when I started in the industry, it was just kind of when social media marketing and all of that started to become a bigger thing. My passion has always been in content, in writing. At one stage, I thought I was going to be a journalist. But when digital marketing kind of became a thing, I got an opportunity and fell into it and really started loving it. I think, for someone that is creative, digital marketing is a fantastic place, but it's also a great place for someone that is quite analytical, because there is a lot of, number crunching, strategy, lots of that as well. So it's actually a really interesting industry, because it's a great combination of creativity, analytics, and, within that spectrum, there really is, I think, a role for anyone. But I do agree. It's very important that you need to love your job. I think especially, in a high pressure environment, when you're looking after the digital marketing of a big retailer, you have to love it because it is highly pressured. It is intense. There's constantly excos constantly wanting more and wanting more campaigns. So it is important that you love it because it is highly pressured and you need to find a sense of achievement in the work that you do. Okay, with direct marketing, what informs how often you get in contact with customers? How do you toe the line between annoying and memorable? Thank you so much for this question. This is a, a very important question, and it's a big challenge. I'm going to be very honest, this is an ongoing struggle because at the end of the day, the business obviously wants to communicate as aggressively as they can, right? As you can imagine, as a business owner that wants to drive as many sales, a lot of the times, it's like more is less type of thing, not less is more. So that is a big challenge for me. And that's a big thing that I need to drive and that I constantly engage with from my senior leadership is to create that awareness, is to say, yes, we need to drive awareness, we need to promote this product, but we also need to respect our customers' eyeballs, to be honest, especially when it comes to something like emails and SMS. If we over communicate, we will frustrate customers. But look, that is quite an easy conversation to have because you can justify it with analytics. And that's the powerful thing with digital marketing is that you don't have to just base your opinion on kind of intuition. You can bring up the stats to show. So for example, if we are over communicating, what would happen? We would see a drop in online subscriptions into our newsletter. We would see an increase of customer complaints. And we might even see a reduction in sales, right? Especially based on our email accounts. So that's the power of digital, is that with all the data at your disposal, you can effectively manage that discussion. But yeah, totally agree with me. It is a big issue. And it is something that, especially in the retail space, you have to constantly manage because the expectations for campaigns and messaging is very high. Okay, does game have to pay a lot for Google Ads? I just realized that if you Google game, the store won't be the first one that pops up. Is that a challenge in the digital space? Or does the relationship with Google make it easier to manage this sort of inconveniences? Or is it an inconvenience for the bank? Yeah, Nathan, it's a good question. So look, this is also the tricky thing with a brand like that is, and now let's talk about it in the context of digital marketing. As the digital marketing lead, on the one side, I need to support game stores, physical stores, and get more people in store. But on the other side, I need to drive and support this growing e-commerce presence. So that balance is very challenging, right? Because even in the business perspective, it's not necessarily the same stakeholders that are driving those two channels, if that's making sense. So it's very important to manage the expectations. But from a digital marketing perspective, the main agenda, the main focus for our spend and for our strategy is on managing game and promoting game online. Because at the end of the day, where the in-store channels are supported by all the other channels, radio, TV, in-store itself, lots of print work, leaflets. Game online doesn't get that broad support across the board. It does, but not to the same extent that the stores do. So that's why my game online marketing spend, my Google spend, my social media spend is very focused on promoting game online rather than the stores, because that is the main channel that drives traffic to the website. So without that support, it's a struggle to drive the sales. So strategically, I support there. I do support stores, but to a latter extent, and that's probably also what you would see, when you do a simple search, is that the focus isn't really on game stores, but it's more about game online, because that's kind of where we're focusing our efforts. Okay, and then from the Sandton campus students, Eva, could you give us some insight into game's brand positioning statement and how you use it or refer to it in your campaign, since students have to write the positioning statement for Showmax in their next assignment? Okay, that's a great question. What I can do is, I think, just because that's quite a nice juicy question, I think maybe what we can do is I can always just share the game brand positioning work, and then we can go into that in more detail. But just to speak about it a little bit high level, very important that my game digital marketing approach aligns to the game brand positioning. So without, I don't have the exact line here with me now, but without going into it in too much detail, it is all focused on everyday low pricing. So the brand is very positioned in that space, and it's about providing customers with everyday lowest pricing as far as possible across the board, across all categories. And then that's kind of the brand positioning in terms of the brand tone and personality. It's very focused on being a rebel, being, not taking ourselves too seriously, and being, the brand that's happy to disrupt in the space, in that specific market. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. A very important thing that I think about how I showcase that in digital. So when it comes to our social media content, our digital marketing content on the website, everything has to have that same flavor. So it comes down to the brand identity in terms of the color tones that we use. It has to all feel very consistent. As you can see, even with my presentation, the pink is front and center because that's a core element of the brand identity. But yeah, without going into too much detail, very, very important. And it's something that we have to constantly review. We're actually having a review session with our agency tomorrow to relook, all of the assets of the last quarter to make sure, is all of our messaging still on brand? Let's look at the brand position statement. Is it consistent? What are we saying on the website? What are we saying on social media? How does it show up in our leaflets? How does it show up in store? But yeah, very important. We need to constantly remind ourselves of that, because if we veer off track, we are undermining the brand positioning. And that can do a lot of harm on the brand that we've built. But yeah, I hope on a high level that answers the question. Okay, I think I've answered all of the questions. Karika, what do you think? I know there's not too much time left. Should I maybe quickly just run through the last few slides?
Yeah, I think you could go on. It's fine.
Okay, perfect. I'll just go through it very, very quickly. I'm not going to go through it in lots of detail, but just to give you a little bit of a view. So look, we've spoken about the collaboration, co-creation with influencers, but co-creation with customers is very important as well. So in December, we wanted to take this idea and develop a campaign around it. And very excited about this campaign. We're actually busy developing this for a case study for award submission, because it really, really performed well, and we got some really great results. But just a bit of background, really what it was about saying is that how do we increase stalkability for game during the festive season? And the festive season, once again, for anyone that knows about retail, is a highly competitive time. All of the brands are, and all of the retail brands are running big campaigns. So you need to really be creative in how you show up, especially in the digital space, to kind of differentiate the brand during that time. So what we've decided was to create a digital campaign that allows us to engage with our online audience, but actually make them a part of the campaign and actually use our audience to create content in itself. And the campaign concept was called Compliments of the Season. Compliments of the Season, it's one of those sayings that everyone uses, but rarely do people actually, really think about what they mean by it. It's just kind of like a nice, polite statement to say compliments of the season. So we kind of took that idea and said, okay, how do we take that and run with it on digital? And we actually turned it on its head to say, okay, compliments, I'm giving you compliments of the season, but now we want you to return the favor. How do you give compliments to your fellow South Africans? And really just spread some positive cheer during this festive period. So what we did was we ran this campaign across all of our digital marketing channels, social media, on-site marketing. We did web push notifications, paid social media, targeted emailers. And then, the central point of our campaign was this advanced Twitter experience, which we ran through a company called Blue Robot, which basically creates this mini microsite activations for Twitter that kind of sits basically at the back end of Twitter. I'm not going to go through that in detail, but basically what it meant was we could create this really interesting customer journey where we would send out content and say compliments of the season, to stand a chance to win, use this campaign hashtag and send a compliment to one of your fellow friends on Twitter. So all you would have to do is use the campaign hashtag, tweet the brand, and add a compliment and tag your friend. So as soon as you did that with this program that we developed, we would automatically pick up on those tweets. that would go into a backend. We would moderate and approve the tweets. And as we were approving those tweets, they were filling up this virtual, what we call a Twitter mosaic. So basically what that is it's an image, one of our campaign images, which is this image, which would then gradually fill up electronically with all of the compliments that we've been receiving. So it becomes a very strong and powerful statement, because all of the content on this microsite is not content from game, it's compliments that our audience has created, that our audience has been tweeting. And we are just funneling and collecting that on this microsite. And what's really great about the microsite, as it's filling up, you can go onto the microsite, search for your name, or search for your friend's name, and zoom in on their compliment. So it becomes a really emotive thing, because not only are we actively spreading the festive cheer, you can actually go and see your tweet in live on this microsite, which creates a really strong emotive connection. So yeah, not going to go through the detail. This is just some examples of the influencer content that we also created. We got great engagement from customers. We increased our share of voice on digital massively. We increased the positive sentiment of the brand as well. So yeah, it was just all in all really a very successful campaign. And yeah, we're very excited to do more of these type of campaigns in the future. But yeah, that's it. I think maybe, Karika, before I go on more, maybe we should leave it at that.
Let's just ask, after this interesting last part of the presentation, is there any questions, comments, critique? You can criticize Evert. He can take it.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
Okay. Yeah, you see, this is the after 4 time. After 4, eh? Yeah.
No, but that's
here we go.
Yeah, there's something there. Okay, cool.
What's no criticism, and what soccer team do you support?
Yeah, this is the worst question to ask me. The answer is none. Now I'm very embarrassed.
The safest answer.
The safest answer, yeah. No, honestly, no. I'm so bad. This is because I'm way too much of a gamer. I wish I was more of a soccer supporter. I wish I could be more into soccer, because then I would have stuff to talk about at the braai. But this is a problem I have. So yeah, let's say that. Oh no, but thank you. Thanks, Claire, as well, for the feedback. No, that's great. And thanks all. I really appreciate all the comments and the questions. It was fantastic.
Cool. Guys, if that's it, thank you so much. Let me just wait this video on again. Thank you so much all for joining us today. I know it was a late session, but I'm sure you all agree with me. It was informative, yes, and for me, and it definitely was worth your while, even if it's not always exactly what you're going to use for your next assignment. I find that guest lectures help you in your world of work and in future assessments and in developing your own critical thinking skills. So Evert, thank you so much for taking the time out and presenting to our students and to our lecturers, and we wish you the best.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure. Have a lovely evening.
You too, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.